Shawn Doyle, partner and leader Latin America practice at McCarthy Tetrault. He joins us from Vancouver. Shawn, thank you for your time. First of all, when it comes to the mining royalty tax in Chile, do you think that the miners will knuckle down, accept it, and pay it, or are they going to fight it?
Well, I don't know if they really can fight it, Sri. I think it's more of a question of how far the government is going to push, if indeed we end up with a Gabriel Boric far-left government. Today's results indicate that there is going to be a runoff in December between the far left and the far right. Most analysts coming into this would say that the far left in that matchup comes out ahead. So the question is, if we have a new Boric government with a significant communist presence in the coalition and this royalty of up to 75%, will they push ahead with that, or will they, having in mind old adages about geese and golden eggs and so on, will they temper their proposals? I think they will to some extent, but will they temper them enough? Right now, Chile is sort of in the mid to high end of the pack in terms of the total tax burden on miners, about 40%. If everything that's been aired on the left were implemented, it would be closer to 90%. And, not surprisingly, analysts calculate if that were to happen, if it would be fully implemented, that would cause some mines to close. You would see job losses. You would see exports decline, the currency threaten. So maybe they won't push all the way to the extremes. They might press taxes right up to the limit of what existing mature industry can bear at the expense of choking off new projects. It's possible, but we'll see. Some are more sanguine than others about this, and I tend to think some moderation is likely.
Understood. So it's really a question of how far they are going to go. And while we're talking about the threat of resources nationalism, if I can ask you this, Shawn, is it extreme? An extreme scenario to expect some talk of expropriation even, or is that way out there?
Yeah, I think that is way out there. I think, that prospect was probably more realistic in Peru, and even there we haven't seen that play out. We do see some resurgent resource nationalism in Peru, in Mexico, and elsewhere. The Boric campaign, and again, we're assuming that he would win a runoff vote, but they've recently made some conciliatory statements. Probably not expropriation per se, but maybe what they're looking to see is more processing, more value added in Chile. It's probably not very realistic, but I think that the tax increase is probably the biggest risk. And I would also say that all of this is occurring, as you know, with this overhang of significant uncertainty due to the ongoing process to rewrite the Constitution. And most of the delegates doing that work are from the far left or the left, or political unknowns, and there have been some anti-mining noises coming out of that process. So it's maybe a bigger issue even than this election. Governments come and go, but the Constitution, we don't know what that document is going to say, but our clients, miners, are wary of that. It could change the rules in areas that are important to miners, like mineral titles, land titles, environmental regulation, consultation with indigenous peoples, and so on. So that may be the biggest risk here that we're looking at.
Yeah. Shawn, I actually wanted to touch on that with you, because obviously you're dealing with a lot of the clients, and when you speak to CEOs of companies, I suppose in the media, they can't necessarily be upfront with a lot of the issues that they are indeed expecting. So what would you say are your clients' biggest risks, the miners, when it comes to what they're foreseeing to come out of this election process, but also what you mentioned when it does come to the prospect of the changes to the Constitution? Is it tax stabilization risk? Is it the fact that their capex now is a little bit uncertain? What are they saying to you?
Well, I think you have to take them in turn. If we're talking about the election, I think the biggest risk is the tax risk, and it's everyone knows taxes are going to go up, and it's a matter of, as I say, how far they press. Tax stabilization isn't really on the table. For many years, all projects in Chile were developed under Decree Law 600, Decreto Ley 600, which beginning in the 80s allowed investors just basically by filling out some forms. It wasn't a very difficult process to cause the state to enter into a tax stability agreement. And the last Michelle Bachelet government did away with that, and I don't think it really got a huge amount of attention at the time. Those agreements were seen, I think, as being no longer indispensable in modern Chile. But now, a couple of years out, they're again definitely relevant, but they're not available. Existing agreements will mostly expire in the next 2 years, and there are a few, perhaps no other sources of guarantees. Then on the constitutional side, yeah, I think you hear different opinions. Look, last month I met with a Chilean congressman, a sitting congressman from one of the traditional center-right parties, and he told me privately that, in his opinion, he thinks that this new constitution, once it emerges, will be tolerable. He thinks that once the uncertainty is lifted, and the uncertainty is half the problem here, Chile can go back to boom times. But that's certainly not a view shared by everyone, and others are very worried. We see and some investment drying up. We see exploration spending drying up, moving to other regions, Canada, the U.S., and West Africa, notably. And just last week we saw the indigenous group within the Constitutional Assembly put out a paper that called for invalidating some existing mining concessions, which was obviously a source of worry. It was a little shocking too, because the cross-party agreement that led to this process to rewrite the Constitution imposed some very modest guardrails on the process. One is that the new Constitution not abrogate international treaties, and the other is that the new Constitution not invalidate existing judicial rulings. And that's relevant because in Chile, mining concessions are granted via a judicial ruling. So this willingness on the part of some within the assembly to apparently not respect these very modest constraints that have been placed on them is a concern for many.
Shawn, as well, in terms of the Constitution, the tax, directing that tax income for specific purposes, do you think this is going to shift how mining companies, if that was to go ahead, operate within Chile entirely? Because that's basically then shifting how they would behave in terms of providing the social programs, providing all of these things that they are inherently expected to. If the taxes are then going to be directed into those kind of programs, do you think they'll stop?
Well, yeah, this is interesting because generally constitutions don't say that much about taxes. Taxes don't get levied via constitutions, but people do think that this constitution, the new constitution, could change two things. One is that right now the taxation power resides with the administration, with the president, and that's one of the reasons why this royalty proposal hasn't been able to go ahead, because right now you have a center-right government, although you have left-wing margins in both houses. They have majorities. But the other thing that could change, as you say, is that while right now all taxes go into the general treasury, in the future, taxes, it may be possible under the new constitution for taxes to be destined to particular regions, and here we're talking about the regions in the north where most of the mining takes place. And yeah, this is an old lament in Chile that all the taxes flow to the center, and that the regions where the mining is happening don't benefit. And so if more of that could be directed to the north, I think you're right that may in a way lift some of the burden on mining companies, which are right now expected to pay taxes to the central government and provide various benefits in the north where they operate. That in a way could be the silver lining here for them.
Yeah, Shawn, listen, let me quickly jump in, Martin, here with a question. For most outside, observers and also most viewers tuning in to this, when they look at it, you got this far-right guy, Cast, and this guy seems like he's ready to go back to the future. He admires Augusto Pinochet, etc. On the other hand, you got the far left, and the guy's 35 years old. Either way, it would be a reasonable sort of perception that, and because of history as well, of nationalization or Chileanization of sectors like copper, for example, for people to think that state ownership, nationalization, or renationalization broadly is probably the biggest risk facing the mining sector in Chile. I mean, that would be reasonable, wouldn't it?
I don't know if that is reasonable, Martin. I think it's always a risk that looms. And as you say, there's a history of this in Chile. So what's happened once before, perhaps one could say it might happen again. But none of the parties are talking about that. I mean, if Cast ends up winning this thing, then that's going to be good news for miners. If Boric is president, taxes are going to go up, and there's going to be regulatory tightening. I don't think that many commentators believe that outright nationalization is a likely outcome, but if that outcome should play out, there are bilateral investment treaties which would provide protection for most of the global mining industry. Again, it's not what people are talking about, but in a way, you're right that this is not a good outcome in that we have extremes on both sides here. We've seen the evisceration of both the center right and the center left. The hope of many of our clients was that that this would end up being a runoff between the far left and either the center right or the center left, because either were seen as being capable of beating the far left, whereas it looks like, well, it's going to be a runoff between the far right and the far left. And unfortunately for some of our clients, Cast, even though he seems to be the top vote getter today, is still seen as unlikely to be able to take down the far left Boric in a head-to-head matchup. So,
wow. Okay. We'll wait and see, I guess. Listen, Shawn, fascinating talking to you. Don't talk about Chile enough, I think. Thank you for the time. Appreciate it. You keep safe, and we'll do it again very soon. I have Shawn Doyle there, McCarthy Tetrault, joining us live.